On a frozen mountain where no help should have existed, a Navy SEAL on leave stumbled into a nightmare. A dying ranger, a loyal K-9 left to freeze, and a warning carved into the snow. No one survives if they interfere. But Ethan Ward wasn't just anyone. What followed was a battle in the heart of a blizzard, a fight against a hidden criminal empire, and a race to save innocent lives, including the brave dog who would become his partner. And at sunrise, the truth returned with the light. If you believe courage can rise in the darkest hours, stay with us. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of hope, heroes, and second chances. A white storm swallowed the mountains, turning the world into a trembling sheet of ice and wind. Ethan Ward moved through it like a dark blade pushing against nature's teeth. At 32, he had the kind of presence that bent storms away, not physically, but by the force of his steady, disciplined aura. He was tall, a solid 6'3", with the broad shoulders and corded musculature formed through years of Navy discipline. His skin held the bronze of sunlit deployments, uneven in tone but fierce in resilience, and his dark hair, cropped military short, clung to his forehead in wet lines beneath his wool cap. The angles of his face were sharp, sculpted by hardship, a straight nose broken once in combat, a jaw that clenched whenever memory pressed too close, and eyes the color of storm-soaked earth, brown but heavy with shadows. A man built for conflict and yet desperate for silence. That was the paradox of Ethan Ward. He had come to this remote ridge in Wyoming because the world had asked too much of him for too long. Months of classified missions had carved hollows in his soul. Too many nights he had returned to base with blood on his gloves, sometimes enemy, sometimes friend. And there had been that last operation, the one that replayed in his mind whenever sleep dared approach. The ambush in Kabul, where his closest teammate, Marcus Hale, died in his arms after a hidden explosive tore through the convoy. Marcus's last words, "Don't let this break you, Ethan," echoed inside him like a command he had not figured out how to obey. Silence. He had come here for silence. But the blizzard refused him even that. Snow hammered the pine roofs, whirled across the cliffs, and clawed at Ethan's coat as he patrolled the perimeter of the small cabin he had rented for 30 days. His boots crunched through the drifts, each step sinking past his ankles. He moved with the automatic precision of a soldier who never stopped taking stock of his surroundings, even on leave. Storm shutters? Secured. Generator? Stable. Woodshed? Latched. He should have gone inside, should have shut out the storm and the memories it stirred. But something tugged at him, a prickle at the back of his mind, the whisper of instinct honed through years of war. Ethan paused, letting the wind whip snow across his face. His breath formed a white halo around him. Then he heard it, a thin, broken sound carved into the wind's scream, a sound that did not belong to any creature of the mountains, a human sound. Ethan's posture shifted instantly. His spine straightened, his shoulders tightened. He reached for the high-lumen flashlight clipped to his belt, the weight of it familiar like an old friend. When he clicked it on, its bright cone cut a clean tunnel through the snow. For a long moment, there was nothing but white chaos. Then, movement. A shadow slumped against the base of a pine tree about 30 yards from the property line. Instinct carried him forward before thought could catch up. His boots plunged deeper with each step, snow battering his legs. His mind sharpened, toggling into the mode that had saved his life more times than he could count. His heartbeat slowed. His breaths grew even. Somewhere beneath all this, a darker voice whispered, "It's happening again, Ward. You don't get peace, you get danger." When he reached the shape, the light trembled across a figure collapsed in the snow. A woman. Her body was curled into itself, frozen into a posture of agony. She wore the torn remains of a forest ranger's jacket, the green fabric shredded and stiff with frozen blood. Her hair, a long chestnut brown now matted with snow and ice, clung to her cheeks. Her skin was ghost white, lips tinged blue, lashes rimed with frost. She looked around 30, with angular cheekbones and a narrow jaw that hinted at determination, even in weakness. Her hands were bound tightly behind her back with rough rope, the knots clean and practiced. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. "Ma'am," Ethan said sharply, kneeling beside her, voice steady even though dread curled in his gut. "Can you hear me?" A faint moan slipped past her lips, barely audible over the gale. But she was alive. Then his flashlight caught a second shape. A dog. No, not a dog. A K9 military shepherd. The animal lay on its side, half buried in snow, its thick sable and black coat torn in several places. Muscles still rippled beneath the fur, testimony to years of elite training. Its ears were pricked even in unconsciousness, though one was nicked near the tip. The dog's chest rose shallowly, and a low, struggling growl rattled inside its throat. Attached to its collar was a metal tag stamped with one word, Ranger. A canine like this wasn't a pet, it was a warrior, likely 5 or 6 years old, prime working age. And judging by the rope cutting into its legs and the bruises beneath its fur, the animal had fought viciously before going down. Ethan's pulse spiked. He scanned the tree line with razor focus, expecting gunfire, movement, anything. The storm offered perfect cover for an ambush. And that's when he saw it. Pinned to the trunk above the woman's head was a strip of wood, carved with rough letters burned into its surface. "Anyone who interferes will not see the next dawn." Ethan felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, determination. The kind that burned silently and immovably. "Okay," he muttered, more to himself than to them. "I'm not leaving you here." He cut the ropes binding the dog first. Ranger twitched, a tremor rippling through its powerful body. Ethan kept his voice low, calm, the way handlers spoke to frightened animals in combat zones. "Easy, boy, you're safe now." The dog's ear flicked weakly, acknowledging the tone more than the words. Next, Ethan sliced the ropes on the woman's wrists. Her skin was raw where the fibers had dug into her. He checked her pulse. Faint, but there. Hypothermia was the real enemy now. Blood loss too, though he couldn't yet see how deep the wounds were beneath her jacket. He assessed the situation with rapid-fire clarity. The cabin was close, maybe 40 yards, but he couldn't carry both at once. The storm was worsening, wind howling like a living thing. Leaving either behind risked death. But the dog, an unrestrained, panicked K9, could snap under stress. He made his choice. He shrugged off his thick winter coat and draped it around the woman's torso, bundling her as tightly as possible. Then he lifted Ranger, whose 90 pounds of trained muscle hung limp in his arms. Even unconscious, the shepherd's weight was formidable. But Ethan had carried grown men through worse conditions. He trudged back toward the cabin, fighting the storm step by brutal step. Every muscle in his back screamed, but his mind stayed locked on the rhythm of survival. When he reached the porch, he kicked the door open, laid Ranger gently on a wool rug near the fire, then turned and sprinted back into the storm. His face stung from the cold, his chest burned, but adrenaline carried him. The woman remained where he had left her, half buried now, snow beginning to claim her shape. Ethan knelt, scooped her into his arms. She was shockingly light, as though the storm itself had hollowed her out. Her breath fluttered against his chest, faint but present. "Stay with me," he whispered, pushing through the wind. "Don't you dare quit." Back inside, he laid her on the leather couch near the roaring fire. For a moment, the cabin filled with the scent of wet fur, cold metal, pine, and blood, a blend that transported Ethan back to every makeshift battlefield medic station he had ever been in. But he forced the memories down. He wasn't in Kabul. He wasn't losing Marcus again. He had 2 lives depending on him. He worked quickly, stripping off the woman's wet jacket, wrapping her in blankets, checking for broken ribs, bleeding, frostbite. Her eyelashes fluttered. A soft sound escaped her throat, half groan, half plea. Ethan felt something twist in him, compassion, sharp and unwelcome, the kind he tried not to feel anymore. Then a faint growl rose behind him. Ranger, the K9, was awake. The dog lifted its head weakly, one eye swollen, the other burning with protective fire. Ranger didn't snarl or attack. It simply angled its body toward the woman, as if guarding her even at the edge of death. "You're loyal," Ethan murmured. "Good. We're going to get through this." He secured the door, bolted it firmly. The storm outside roared like a beast denied its prey. He checked the windows, shutters locked tight, but the sense of danger didn't fade. Whoever had attacked these 2 had moved with precision. They would look for their victims, and when they discovered the bodies missing, they would come hunting. He grabbed his shotgun and set it within arm's reach of the fireplace. The woman stirred, her voice a thin whisper. "Don't let them find us." Ethan leaned closer. Who did this?" Her eyes fluttered open briefly, deep hazel, filled with terror and grit. She forced out one word before consciousness slipped away again. "Serpents." The fire crackled. Ranger's breathing steadied. The wind howled. And Ethan Ward, who had come to the mountains seeking peace, understood in that moment that peace would not be granted to him. Not tonight, not ever. Because the world's violence had once again found his door, and he was a man who could never walk away. He stood, tightening his grip on the shotgun as the storm pounded against the cabin walls. He had just stepped into the heart of something far more dangerous than the blizzard outside. And dawn was a very long way off. The storm hammered the cabin like 1,000 fists, but inside, Ethan Ward moved with the sharp, disciplined purpose of a man who had spent most of his adult life snatching order from chaos. Clara Hayes lay on the couch, wrapped tightly in blankets, her breath shallow but steadier now. Ranger, despite his wounds, had shifted himself so that his body angled protectively toward her, as if the instinct to guard overrode the pain. The fire crackled, filling the cabin with an orange glow that softened the hard edges of the night, though nothing could soften the tension burning in Ethan's chest. Clara's eyelids fluttered as consciousness tugged her upward. When her eyes finally opened fully, they were not confused this time, only sharp with the pain of memory returning. She examined her surroundings, her gaze flicking from the rafters to the fire to the man standing watch. Ethan noticed the brief moment where she assessed him, first as a stranger, then as someone who had helped her. Years of reading battlefield micro-expressions told him she was deciding whether he was a threat. Only when her shoulders loosened by a fractional degree Did he know she determined he wasn't? Clara Hayes was a resilient woman. Now that she was conscious, he could see the features that hardship had sharpened. She appeared around 30, tall for a woman, with a lean, athletic build that spoke of long patrols in unforgiving terrain. Her hair, snow-damp chestnut strands, fell in loose waves to her shoulders. Her facial structure was sharp and angular, with defined cheekbones and a narrow jaw that gave her an air of persistent determination. Her skin was fair, but wind-chapped from years outdoors, and faint freckles dusted the bridge of her nose. Even in exhaustion, her eyes, hazel with a hint of gold near the pupil, held a depth of vigilance that was familiar to Ethan. It was the look of someone who had been forced to watch shadows more than people. "You're awake," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "Don't move too much yet. You're hypothermic, dehydrated, and bruised half to hell." Clara inhaled sharply as she shifted. "Feels like it," she murmured, voice hoarse. "Where?" Her gaze finally found Ranger. The dog lifted his head weakly, his tail giving the smallest thump. Clara's entire expression softened. Not relief exactly, but something deeper, more personal. "You're alive," she whispered to him. "Thank God." Ethan watched the exchange, noting the bond. It wasn't just professional. Clara had the posture of someone who trusted the dog with her life. And the dog, even half-conscious, mirrored that trust. "You found us?" she asked. "Storm did the rest," Ethan replied. "You were about 30 yards off. Someone left a message carved on a board above you." Her jaw tensed. "A warning?" "A threat," Ethan corrected. Clara exhaled shakily, then pushed herself upright, despite the pain lancing through her ribs. Ethan moved reflexively to steady her, but she lifted a hand, shaking but resolute, to keep him back. "I can sit on my own." She winced hard, but stayed upright. "I need to explain before it's too late." Ethan dragged a wooden chair closer, sitting with his elbows on his knees. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were focused, the way a marksman studies a target before deciding if it's hostile. "I'm listening," Clara swallowed. "My name is Clara Hayes, U.S. Forest Service. I'm part of a federal interagency task force investigating a group calling themselves the Frost Serpents." Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of speaking. "They started as high-level poachers, wolves, eagles, mountain cats, but it evolved. Guns, explosives, trafficking military gear, maybe even precursor chemicals. We had reason to believe they were getting protection from the inside." Ethan leaned forward. "Inside where?" "The Forest Service, Wildlife Enforcement Division." She looked away, shame or frustration tightening her shoulders. "Someone with authority has been clearing their tracks, closing trails before patrols can find things, reassigning officers who get too close, even erasing reports." Ethan's jaw clenched. "And you found proof?" "Enough to get me hunted." Her eyes dimmed as she recalled the attack. 2 days ago, I tracked a group to an abandoned storage site near the North Ridge. I was supposed to meet a colleague there to collect evidence." Her voice cracked. "Instead, serpents were waiting. They shot Ranger first to stop him. Then they took my comms, tied us, and dragged us to the tree. They wanted the storm to finish what they started." Ranger let out a low growl, not threatening, but wounded, remembering. Ethan reached to stroke the back of the dog's neck gently. "He fought hard." Clara nodded, emotion tightening her throat. "He always does." She looked at Ethan with a sudden intensity. "You saved our lives. I'm grateful, but you should have let us die." Ethan frowned. "Why the hell would I do that?" Because now they'll come for you too. For a moment, the wind howled outside, as if agreeing. Ethan didn't flinch. He'd heard similar warnings on countless missions. They'll find out you're alive eventually, he said. And I'm not the type to leave people behind. Clara studied him quietly. You're military. Was. His tone grew cooler. Navy. Her eyes sharpened with recognition, not of his identity, but of what that meant. Explains the reflexes, she murmured, and why you carried Ranger like he weighed nothing. She let out a breath, one hand pushing her hair from her face. What's your name? Ethan Ward. Clara nodded slowly, memorizing it, committing it. Her posture eased by a fraction. People trusted Ethan instinctively, his voice, his steadiness, his presence. But trust was also a liability. Her gaze shifted toward the frosted window. They won't give up. The serpents, they're not amateurs. They don't leave loose ends. Ranger stirred, lifting his head higher. His ears quivered, his nose twitching. Something in the air had shifted. Ethan felt it too. A silence that wasn't natural. The kind of silence that lived before violence. He stood. Stay with him. I'll check the perimeter. Clara grabbed his sleeve with surprising strength. Wait. The urgency in her eyes was unmistakable. They're trained hunters, Ward. They move in teams. They isolate. They use night and terrain like weapons. Her breathing hitched. And they always finish what they start. Ethan looked down at her hand. It trembled. Whether from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. He didn't pull away. So do I, he said quietly. Then he slipped free and took the shotgun with him. He approached the window on the north side of the cabin, wiping a thin patch of frost away with his sleeve. What he saw made the hairs at the back of his neck rise. Nothing, no movement, no shadows, not even the shape of wind stirring branches. Just an unnerving stillness, as though the forest itself held its breath. Ranger suddenly forced himself onto shaky legs, limping to the doorway leading toward the northern wall. His ears pinned forward, his muzzle lifted sharply. A chilling rumble vibrated in his chest. Ethan returned to Clara. He senses something. Clara tried standing, but winced. He always reacts first. If Ranger growls, they're close. The wind slammed against the cabin, then softened again, as if muffled by bodies moving through it. How many did you see before? Ethan asked. 4. Her voice was tight. But serpents operate in units of 6 to 8, and they know this terrain as well as any ranger. Ethan checked his gear. Flashlight, knife, ammunition. We need to prepare. For the next 10 minutes, he scanned the entire cabin, reinforcing the doors, repositioning furniture to create cover angles. Clara watched him with a mix of awe and dread. His movements were efficient, fluid, practiced. Every action was purposeful. He had done this before, exactly this, and not just once. You've seen combat, she said quietly. Ethan didn't look at her. Too much of it, she hesitated. Is that why you're here, alone in a mountain cabin? People break differently, he answered. Some loud, some quiet. I got tired of losing teammates, losing pieces of myself with every mission. Clara's gaze softened. I'm sorry. He shrugged, though the tension in his shoulders remained. We all carry ghosts. Ranger growled again, but this time the sound was sharper, more urgent. He pressed his injured body against the door frame, head pointed north, tail stiff. Ethan froze. That wasn't a warning growl. His voice sank into steel. That was recognition. Clara's eyes widened. They're here. Ethan moved to the window again. Snow swirled, wind raged, and then, faintly, He saw it, a dark figure slipping between two pines, almost invisible if not for a momentary break in the storm's density. Then another shape, and another, shadows stalking the cabin with deliberate, predatory intent. He stepped back from the window, muscles tightening. 3 confirmed, maybe more. Clara's breathing quickened. They'll encircle first, cut off escape, then push you out through the weak point. Back door, Ethan muttered. They'll expect us to run. Ranger limped toward Ethan, resting his head against the man's thigh, as if offering both warning and allegiance. Ethan knelt beside him, placing one hand on the dog's shoulder. I know, boy, they're coming. The storm groaned, the lights flickered, and the cold seemed to deepen, as though the world outside recognized violence was approaching. Then, not loud but sharp enough, a crack sounded somewhere beyond the tree line. A snapped branch, not wind, not wildlife, human. Ethan stood slowly, shotgun in hand, eyes burning with the focused calm of a soldier returning to the battlefield against his will. Ranger bared his teeth, silent but fierce. Clara whispered, They're going to kill us. Ethan shook his head once. Not tonight. Outside, something moved again, closer this time, deliberate, calculating. The serpents had found their trail, and they were closing in. Dawn had not yet broken, but the world outside the cabin glowed faintly with the cold blue of a dying night. The kind of hour where danger breathes deepest. The storm had calmed just enough for the forest to stand like sharpened silhouettes against the horizon. Yet the silence was wrong, too dense, too controlled. Ethan Ward felt the wrongness before he heard it. He had known ambushes that began like this, the quiet that came when trained men moved in sync, their footsteps swallowing themselves into the snow. Clara Hayes felt it too. She sat upright, despite the pain in her ribs, her sharp hazel eyes fixed on the fogged window. Ranger, though injured, had risen onto trembling paws, his head lowered, ears pinned tight, body angled toward the north wall. His instincts, the instincts of a dog forged in the discipline of military operations, had become a warning beacon in the dark. Ethan exhaled slowly, quiet but measured. They're surrounding us, he said. Clara's expression hardened. They move before sunrise, standard serpent tactic, use the half-light for concealment. Ethan nodded once, the old rhythm of war returning to him like the beat of a phantom pulse. His voice dropped to a whisper, a tone he had used too many times while briefing a team before a breaching maneuver. We don't wait, we disrupt, we force mistakes. His hands moved quickly as he prepared the cabin. He grabbed empty tin cans from the shelf, thin cord from his gear case, and began fashioning alarm lines across the porch windows and near the back entrance. Clara watched him, her mind absorbing every detail. You've done this before, she murmured. Far too many times. Ethan didn't answer. His sharp jaw tightened as he secured one line, the stubble along his chin illuminated in the firelight. There was something carved into his face, an old grief, not yet ready to heal. Ranger limped to his side, nudging Ethan's boot gently, a silent readiness. Ethan placed a hand on the dog's neck. Not today, boy, he whispered. Not if I can help it. But Ranger shook off the concern, planting himself in front of the door, the muscles beneath his coat trembling, not from fear, but adrenaline. Clara rose unsteadily. What do you need from me? Ethan hesitated. She was injured, but he saw the steel in her eyes. You stay near the south wall. If they breach, you pick targets carefully. No hero shots. Focus on staying alive. Clara nodded, jaw set. Copy that. The first sound came then, a soft crunch of snow, not from one direction, but several. Ethan moved to the window, lifting the edge of the curtain just an inch. Shapes emerged between the pines. Dark silhouettes. 9 bodies moving low, rifles raised, steps synchronized. He saw their winter gear, mottled white and gray camouflage, faces covered, shoulders broad. These were not amateurs. These were trained hunters, frost serpents. Ethan's heart didn't quicken. It slowed, settling into that terrifying calm he had learned in the Navy, the stillness before a fight where the mind became sharper than steel. "Positions," he said softly. Clara steadied herself beside the window, shotgun braced. Ethan crouched near the back door, knife in one hand, firearm in the other. Ranger held beside him, trembling with anticipation. A shadow stepped onto the porch. One of the men triggered a wire. Cans clattered loudly. The silence shattered. The serpent swore, scrambling backward. Ethan didn't hesitate. He fired a controlled burst into the snowbank near the intruder's feet, forcing him into cover. At the same moment, Ranger bolted forward, ignoring the pain in his flank, barking sharply to scatter the formation. "Ranger!" Clara gasped, but Ethan understood immediately. Ranger wasn't attacking. He was signaling, distracting, repositioning the enemy. Ethan seized the opening and slipped out the back, moving fast and silent like a shadow unbound. The snow muffled his steps, his breathing controlled, every muscle wired with purpose. He circled around the cabin while the serpent shifted attention toward the front. Ranger had drawn them like a magnet. Ethan's boots moved through the cold with ruthless precision. He spotted an isolated serpent, tall, heavily built, about mid-30s, wearing a tactical headset. The man's eyes were pale blue beneath his mask, his face weathered, jaw thick with stubble. He carried himself with the confidence of a veteran, someone who had fired shots before and wouldn't hesitate to fire again. Ethan lunged, his arm wrapped around the man's throat, the knife at his ribs. They fell into the snow silently, Ethan's forearm pinning the man's windpipe, just enough to steal breath, but not consciousness. "Don't fight," Ethan hissed into his ear. "You'll lose." The serpent froze, his breath coming in short bursts, his gloved hands twitching, but not resisting. Ethan pressed harder. "How many?" The man ground out, voice rough. 7. No. 8. Frost King wants... Ethan's grip tightened. "Wants what?" The man's jaw clenched. "To erase you and reclaim what Hayes stole." Clara had stolen something? Ethan memorized the detail for later. "Where is Frost King?" he demanded. The serpent exhaled a shaky breath that sent fog billowing into the dawn light. "The ice caverns, East Ridge, preparing a shipment." Ethan's heartbeat faltered for a moment. Ice caverns, a natural maze, a perfect stronghold. "What shipment?" He pressed the blade harder. The man swallowed. "Explosives, weapons, poached assets, big one." Ethan didn't blink. "You expected Clara alive?" "No," the man rasped. "No one survives Frost King." Ethan struck him hard at the base of the skull, rendering him unconscious. He dragged the limp body behind a fallen tree, stripping the man of his radio and ammunition. As he straightened, a shot cracked past his shoulder. Ethan dove behind a stump just as a serpent with a shaved head and heavy frame fired again. This one had a jagged scar across his forehead, pale skin, and eyes like chipped granite, someone forged from brutality, not discipline. Ethan returned fire, forcing him back. It was then Ranger appeared behind the man, silent as winter death. The dog lunged, biting into the man's arm and dragging him into the snow. Ethan sprinted forward, knocking the rifle away. Clara emerged from the cabin with a grimace of pain but clear aim. "Down!" she shouted. Ethan dropped. She fired. Her shot struck perfectly beside the man's head, missing deliberately but close enough to force surrender. Within seconds, the serpent was disarmed and zip-tied. Ethan placed a knee on the man's chest, voice low and lethal. "Where is Frost King?" The scarred man's lips curled. "You won't make it to him." Clara's voice cut through the cold. "We already know about the ice caverns." The man's expression faltered. Clara staggered closer, holding her ribs. "The East Ridge Caverns were sealed off 10 years ago," she said. "Landslide risk. No one goes there. Perfect place to hide a weapons cache." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "We need to move before they regroup." Clara nodded, though she barely stayed upright. "East Caverns. It's not far. Maybe 40 minutes down the ridge." Ranger barked once, tail stiff, ready to follow despite pain. Ethan crouched beside the dog, checking the wound. Ranger's breathing was shallow, but steady. His eyes, sharp with loyalty, met Ethan's. "You're not staying behind," Ethan murmured. Ranger pressed his muzzle into Ethan's palm as if agreeing. Clara leaned heavily against the wall of the cabin. "Frost King isn't just a leader. He's ex-military, deserted, brutal, genius in cold terrain." Ethan's jaw hardened. "Then we need to hunt a ghost." Clara nodded once, fierce beneath her pain. "Then let's end this." Ranger stood beside them, resolute. The serpents had tried to hunt them, but now the hunt was turning back, and Ethan, shaped by war, strengthened by purpose, made the decision that would define the next hours of their lives. We go to the caverns. The wind shrieked across the eastern ridge as Ethan Ward led Clara Hayes and Ranger through the narrowing trail that curved like a scar toward the forbidden caverns. The sky above was a slab of pale silver, promising another storm, but the forest below was eerily silent. Each step they took sank into snow that swallowed sound. Ethan felt the landscape closing in, sharp cliffs rising on either side, the air so cold it turned every breath into a ghost that lingered before fading. Ranger limped at his side, determined despite pain, nose low to the ground. Clara followed behind them, wrapped in Ethan's spare tactical jacket, her ribs bound tight with cloth they'd salvaged. She had insisted on joining the mission, even injured. Ethan had argued for her to stay, but the fire in her eyes, the same fire he had once seen in soldiers who'd lost everything but purpose, convinced him otherwise. Clara Hayes was no longer just a ranger. She was someone wronged, someone whose entire world had been targeted by the frost serpents. No amount of pain could keep her from seeing this through. The entrance to the ice caverns appeared like the open maw of some ancient creature, jagged teeth of frozen rock and icicles stretching downward. Wisps of mist curled from its depths, the air inside 10 degrees colder than the forest behind them. Ethan felt the temperature difference immediately. The cold clamped around his lungs like a fist. Clara's breath trembled. This place, it wasn't always a criminal base. It used to be a guided glacier tour site. Families, school trips, photographers. Her voice dimmed. After the landslide, the entrance collapsed, but the caverns beyond were untouched. Ethan scanned the shadows with a soldier's instinct. A perfect hideout for someone who knows how to move quietly. Ranger stopped abruptly, body stiffening. His tail lifted. A low growl pulsed from his chest. "They're near," Ethan murmured. He drew his sidearm, ensuring the suppressor was tight. Clara readied her rifle, bracing against a boulder. They approached the entrance slowly, Ranger edging forward with cautious steps. Inside, The cavern stretched wide, glowing faintly blue from the way ice trapped and refracted the light. Frozen pillars hung from the ceiling like massive spears of glass. The ground beneath them was uneven, a mixture of packed snow and slick ice. Ethan steadied Clara when she slipped. Then voices echoed through the chamber, faint at first, then growing clearer as they approached a bend. "Hurry up with that crate! Frost King wants these ready by sundown." "He said double-check the triggers," men's voices, harsh, rapid, disciplined. Ethan motioned for Clara to stay low. They moved silently behind a wall of ice that formed a natural barrier. When they peered around it, the sight before them made Clara's breath hitch in her throat. Nearly 20 men worked within the cavern's heart, forming a bustling criminal hive. They wore thick thermal jackets in mismatched camouflage, faces masked, movements sharp and efficient. Crates stamped with military surplus numbers were stacked along the cavern floor. Ethan recognized some immediately: high-yield explosives, detonation cords, industrial-grade charges, enough firepower to wipe out a small town. Clara's face paled. "They're planning something massive," Ethan nodded grimly. "Or selling to someone who is." But then his gaze shifted to a corner lit by a portable lantern where two small shapes huddled, shivering. Children. A girl maybe 10, with tangled blonde hair and a pale face streaked with dirt. A boy even younger, maybe 7, thin as winter bone, dark curls matted against his forehead. Their wrists were bound, their eyes hollow. A man towered over them, barking instructions. Ethan knew instantly that this was Frost King. The criminal leader was large, well over 6 feet, with a barrel chest and thick arms wrapped in heavy winter gear. His coat was trimmed with fur along the collar, and beneath it his torso bulged with a vest lined in protective plates. His beard was long, black, and streaked with gray. His nose crooked as if broken multiple times, his skin pale from years in the cold. But it was his eyes, ice blue and devoid of hesitation, that marked him as a predator. Those eyes had watched others die before. They expected to watch more today. He pushed one child forward harshly. "Lift the crate. Do it right this time or you won't see warmth again." Clara trembled with rage. Ethan placed a hand on her arm, steadying her before emotion made her reckless. Her breath quivered, but she nodded. No sudden moves until the moment mattered. Then Frost King turned to his men. "Once everything is packed, we blast the outer tunnel. The evidence will bury itself under the glacier. Clean exit, clean record. No one will ever know we were here." The decision struck Ethan like a hammer to the chest. If they didn't act soon, the children and anyone trapped in the caverns, including themselves, would die in the blast. He turned to Clara. "We move now," she nodded. Ranger growled softly in agreement. What followed happened in seconds, but felt stretched across eternity. Ethan stormed from cover, moving with the fluid power of a trained seal. His knife flashed once, disabling the nearest guard before he could raise his rifle. Clara took a higher vantage point on an icy ridge, firing controlled, precise shots. Each pull of the trigger was steady, her breath a cold whisper. Ranger leaped into the fray, weaving between legs, snapping at exposed arms, his growls echoing across the cavern. His age and injuries did nothing to blunt his ferocity. He moved with the memory of 100 missions, every instinct laser-focused on protecting his team. The criminals reacted chaotically. Someone shouted, "Intruders!" Others scrambled for weapons. Several fired wildly, bullets ricocheting off ice pillars, sending shards spraying like deadly glass. Ethan closed the distance to Frost King in seconds. Frost King swung a massive punch, fueled by brute strength, but Ethan ducked, countering with a knee strike to the ribs. The leader stumbled, but didn't fall. He was a seasoned fighter, used to pain. Clara shot a man aiming at Ethan's back. Ranger tackled another near the children, standing protectively over them, barking so fiercely the remaining thugs hesitated. The cavern roared with violence, shouts, gunfire, the crack of ice fracturing under pressure. Frost King recovered and lunged. His gloved hands grabbed Ethan's shoulders, trying to force him back against a spire of ice. Ethan pivoted, driving an elbow into his jaw. Frost King's head snapped to the side, beard whipping. He laughed, a cruel, guttural sound. "You think you can stop me? This glacier belongs to me." But Ethan wasn't listening. He saw something far worse behind Frost King. A small remote detonator on a crate, its red light blinking steadily. He had minutes, maybe less. Clara yelled from above, "He's heading for the detonator!" Frost King heard her and grinned savagely. "You're too late." He sprinted toward the device. Men scrambled to cover him. Ethan tried firing, but a criminal tackled him from the side, knocking the gun away. They rolled across the ground, fists flying. Ethan landed a hard blow to the man's throat, sending him crumpling. But Frost King was already reaching the detonator. Ranger saw him first. With a guttural growl, the injured K9 launched himself across the ice, claws scraping, teeth bared. Frost King turned just as Ranger slammed into him, jaws clamping around the detonator harness. The device flew from Frost King's hand, skidding across the cavern floor. "No!" Frost King roared. Ethan surged forward, grabbing the detonator just before it slid beneath a pile of crates. Frost King charged in a fury, but Ethan had the advantage now. He ducked low, sweeping Frost King's legs out from under him. The criminal leader hit the ground hard, air bursting from his lungs. Ethan pinned him, breath ragged. "This ends now." With a final strike, Frost King collapsed into unconsciousness. The remaining serpents froze. Leader down, detonator lost, ambush ruined. Clara aimed her rifle at the nearest one. Ranger bared his teeth. The men dropped their weapons. Ethan looked toward Clara. She looked toward the children. Ranger looked toward Ethan. It was over. The cavern belonged to them now. The first light of morning crept across the Wyoming peaks like a soft golden veil, melting the last shadows of night. Snow along the ridge caught the sunlight and shimmered as though the mountains themselves were waking from a long-held breath. Ethan Ward stepped out of the eastern cavern tunnel with slow, deliberate steps, boots sinking into the powdery snow as if testing the world after a night of chaos. His breath formed white drifting clouds, steady and calm for the first time in hours. The sensation was foreign to him. Peace was never truly peace, not for a man who'd lived his entire adulthood in the narrow space between danger and duty. Behind him, Clara Hayes emerged, carrying the young boy rescued from the cavern. She was no longer the wounded ranger fighting for survival. In the new light, she looked renewed, her figure tall and slender beneath Ethan's spare jacket, her dark hair pulled back into a messy braid, her face pale from fatigue, but strengthened by something deeper than adrenaline. Purpose had a way of sharpening her features. Her hazel eyes, which the night before had flickered with pain and determination, now glowed with the reassurance that justice, once fragile, had become real. Ranger padded out beside Ethan, limping slightly, but still holding his head high. The military K9 was a mix of sable and black, his fur dusted with snow, amber eyes keen and alert despite exhaustion. At 9 years old, with scars mapping his flank and a healed bullet grazed still tender beneath his bandages, he looked every part the war-hardened animal he was. But when he looked up at Ethan, there was a softness few ever saw, the unwavering loyalty of a soldier who had chosen his human. The girl rescued from the cave followed Clara silently. She was small, thin, maybe 10 years old, her blonde hair tangled and her cheeks red from the cold. Yet she walked with surprising strength. Trauma made children age faster than time did. She glanced at Ethan occasionally, not with fear, but with a child's instinctive search for someone solid, someone who would not falter. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice small, slipping into the crisp morning air. Ethan scanned the horizon. Clara waited for his answer. Ranger tilted his head. Every instinct in Ethan's body shifted into calculation. The way the silence stretched, the way the wind carried no scent of danger, the way the forest below showed no signs of movement except drifting smoke from the extinguished campfires of the criminals they had subdued. He had done this assessment thousands of times in different corners of the world. Now, for the first time, the result felt good. "It's over," Ethan said. The girl nodded, hugging herself. The boy, silent since they'd found him, stood close to Clara, his small hand clutching her sleeve. He was 7, with dark curls and wide green eyes that seemed older than his face. Clara knelt beside him. "You're safe," she whispered gently. Her voice had a softness Ethan had rarely heard. "Both of you, we'll get you home." Home. The word struck Ethan like a spark against dry tinder. He could remember a home once, before deployments, before fallout zones and rescue missions, before watching men fall beside him like leaves in a storm. Home was something he had stopped allowing himself to imagine. But seeing the children, seeing Clara, seeing Ranger alive, it stirred something buried. A series of snowmobiles echoed up the ridge, their engines growing louder as they approached. Ethan's hand instinctively reached for his weapon, but Clara touched his arm lightly. "They're ours," she said. "I radioed for help once the cavern was secured." Moments later, the Wyoming Federal Rescue and Wildlife Division arrived. 3 snowmobiles and a small tracked utility vehicle, driven by a team of men and women wearing thick green jackets and winter helmets. Their leader was Deputy Marshal Ronell Brooks, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 40s. His skin was a deep brown, his jaw square and clean-shaven, and his expression stern but intelligent. Years in law enforcement had carved lines around his eyes, but there was something perceptive there, something that understood the weight of violence without letting it crush him. "Clara Hayes," he said, stepping off his snowmobile. "We received your emergency alert, but didn't expect—" His voice cut off as he saw the rescued children, and then Ranger, and then Ethan, who looked like a warrior carved from stone. Clara straightened despite the pain in her ribs. "Deputy Marshal Brooks, meet Ethan Ward. If not for him and Ranger, we wouldn't be standing here." Brooks offered his hand. Ethan shook it silently. "Ward," Brooks said, assessing him with a practiced eye. "Navy?" Ethan nodded. "Still active?" "On leave." Brooks grunted. "Figures." The exchange glance between them was one of understanding. Men who had both walked close enough to death to know its smell. Brooks turned to Clara. "We'll take it from here. Frost Serpents were a ghost organization until now. What you've uncovered, this will put half our databases into overdrive." Clara took a breath, steadying herself. We found their leader, Frost King. He's alive but unconscious. His men surrendered. You'll find them tied near the cavern entrance." Brooks's eyes widened. "You did this with just the three of you?" Ethan opened his mouth, but Clara beat him to it. "We did what we had to." Brooks studied her for a moment, really studied her. Clara Hayes, ranger, survivor, investigator, betrayed by her own agency, now standing as the one who had disrupted the largest illegal arms pipeline in the region. Something in Brooks shifted. Respect, admiration, maybe even a sense of relief. People like Clara were rare. "We'll call in medical evacuation for the kids," Brooks said, "and for you too." "I'm fine," Clara protested. Ethan looked at her, one eyebrow raised. She sighed. "Fine, mostly fine." Brooks gestured to two medics, who quickly examined the children and guided them toward the heated vehicle. Before climbing in, the girl turned back to Ethan. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. Words were unnecessary. Ranger limped over and pressed his head gently against the girl's leg. She giggled, a sound so pure it felt like sunlight. Ethan felt something tight in his chest ease. Brooks approached again. "Ward, Hayes, I'll need both of your statements later, but for now, get some rest. You've earned it." Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the ridge, toward the cabin hidden deep in the woods where this nightmare had begun. Something tugged at him, a feeling he wasn't used to, a sense of belonging. Hours later, when the formalities were done and the criminals transported, Clara asked Ethan to accompany her to the federal outpost in Jackson. The drive down the mountain was quiet. Clara sat in the passenger seat, arms wrapped around her torso, head resting gently against the window. Ranger lay peacefully in the back seat, bandaged but content, occasionally nudging the back of Clara's seat as if checking on her. At the outpost, chaos reigned. Reporters swarmed, officers barked orders, helicopters lifted the wounded. Clara was swept into debriefings, praised by officers, hugged by local rangers, and thanked by families of children not yet aware of what she had saved them from. Ethan stood at the far edge of the room, quiet and steady, watching her navigate the storm of attention with humility and discomfort. Finally, the regional director presented Clara with a commendation medallion. She accepted it with a soft shake of her head, as though it belonged to someone else. Later, after the crowd had dispersed and exhaustion sat heavy in the air, Clara approached Ethan outside the outpost. Ranger stood beside him, his breath forming soft puffs in the chilly afternoon. "Are you heading out now?" she asked. Her voice was careful, but behind it was something hopeful. Ethan looked at the horizon. "Maybe. I came here for quiet. After everything, maybe leaving is the only way I'll find it again." Clara stepped closer. She was still pale, her ribs wrapped, her hair wind-tangled, but she looked stronger, like someone who had walked through darkness and returned with truth in her hands. "I'm not good with goodbyes," she admitted. Ethan's lips curved slightly. "Neither am I." Ranger gave a soft bark. Both turned toward him. Ethan frowned. "What is it, buddy?" Ranger barked again, short, sharp, insistently. Clara knelt beside the K9, running her hand across his fur with gentle familiarity. "He likes you," she said, quietly. Ethan blinked. "Most dogs like anyone with food." "Not Ranger," Clara replied, smiling faintly. "He's selective, very selective." Ranger stepped between them, looking up at Clara, then Ethan, tail thumping weakly. Clara exhaled. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out Ranger's service tag, a small metal plate with his name etched into it. She placed it in Ethan's palm. "He needs a handler now," she said simply. "Someone disciplined, someone who understands him. And I think he already chose one." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "Clara, you saved him," she whispered. "He saved you. I think that bonds two souls tighter than any assignment." Ranger barked once more, almost impatiently. Ethan's expression softened. Something rare, something fragile and warm. A smile, the kind that lifted the edges of his eyes, forming tiny creases that hadn't appeared in years. "So," Clara continued softly, "will you take him?" He crouched beside Ranger, letting their foreheads touch for a moment, an unspoken vow between warriors. "Yeah," Ethan murmured, voice thick with sincerity. "Yeah, I'll take him." When he stood, Clara watched him with a look that held gratitude, affection, and quiet admiration. Ethan looked at her, the sunrise reflecting off his eyes like molten gold. "Maybe peace isn't something we find," he said. "Maybe it's something we build." Clara smiled, softly, beautifully. Then the three of them, Ethan, Clara, and Ranger, turned toward the mountains as dawn spread across the valley. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange and rose. Wind whispered through the pines. Ranger pressed against Ethan's leg. Clara stood close at his side. A new chapter of hope began, built not by escaping danger, but by surviving it together. Just as the mountains welcomed the sun, the world seemed to welcome them back. Sometimes the greatest miracles do not arrive with thunder or light. They appear in the quiet moments when broken people choose to stand again, when a wounded dog refuses to give up, and when strangers become family in the middle of a storm. In our everyday lives, we often forget that hope is not something distant or unreachable. It shows up in small acts of courage, in kindness given without expecting anything back, in the simple truth that even after the coldest night, dawn always returns. If this story touched your heart, let it be a reminder that God still works through the hands of ordinary people, through unexpected friendships, and through the strength He plants inside each of us. And may His protection rest over you and your loved ones, wherever you are, whatever battles you face. If you believe in the quiet miracles that shape our lives, please share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and help us bring more stories of faith, courage, and second chances to the world. May God bless you and keep you safe, always.